All right, what up, everyone? In this video, I'm going to go over every single API call, every single event API call for the Google Calendar API. And I will show you how it looks in the documentation and then in a Bubble App API connector. If you don't understand these resources, so the body of the requests, I have another video. I haven't decided if it's going to be a part one or part two. Where I go over kind of like what every single item, like here, like the end, date, how to create it, how to work with Google Meet links. Here I'm just going to go over really the API calls themselves. In the other video, I go into more detail on the body of those requests and how they work. Okay, so let's start with the list. And the list is essentially a way to get all the events of a specific calendar and display it to, essentially just get a list of all the events of a specific calendar. So the most important thing is we are working with a path parameter. And if you don't know how API request URLs work, I made it a tiny short about it that will be in this playlist and in my YouTube shorts on what the difference is between a path parameter and a query parameter, but all of them go in the URL. So essentially, the path parameter we're looking at is the calendar ID. So what calendar are we getting events from? So in Google Calendar, you can have many different calendars. As you can see, I have all kinds of calendars, and we need to decide where we want the events from. And then there are a bunch of other query requests here that you can look at that are pretty self-explanatory. So always include email, iCal, UID. So this is like iCalendar, that's like the Apple calendar. So ID, not important. Max attendees, number, how many attendees, max results. Do you want to just get 5, 6 calendars? Order by, and then you have 2 acceptable values, so start time and updated. Page token, so if you have like many different requests, it can come in like multiple pages, so you can't, get a million, events in one call. And so I believe that's how it works. And then it will come with page tokens. So you can like switch pages. Private extended property. Okay. I go over extended properties in the other video and what they mean, but essentially you can pull them from here. Filter the list of events by the extended property. And then Q, this is like a query. So if you're searching for events, you can use this. And then shared extended property, I also go over that in the other video, but it's essentially just properties you can specify when creating events. And then show deleted. Okay. So we have a bunch of different constraints we can put on, obviously getting a list of events. And let's just see how it looks kind of in our API call. So first of all, let's look at Google Calendar events. I split everything up into groups based on how it is in the documentation. Over here, you can see calendar list, calendars, and events. And over here, let's go to events. And here, the most important thing is you have to have a shared header authorization and a bearer token. If you haven't seen my auth2 video with how to get an access token in Google APIs, you have to watch that. Otherwise, you won't be able to access these APIs. And then over here, I have all the calls. And let's just get all events from a specific calendar. Perfect. All right. So over here, we can see that we have just the calendar ID. And over here, we can enter in the calendar ID. Similarly to here, we enter in the calendar ID. And in Bubble, if you put square brackets, there will appear a little field here. And you can add in what the value you want to be inserted here, and Bubble will automatically insert this value when you make a call. And so in order to get a calendar ID, I go over in other videos where I go over calendar list and creating calendars. But if you just want to work with your primary calendar, your main calendar, you can just type in the word primary and it will automatically refer to your main calendar, your base calendar, which for me is the Wise Bubbler calendar. And okay, so let's do this. So if we call this specific calendar, we can see that we're getting a list of, events, get all events, and it's kind of giving us all the information about the events. And over here, I'm going to just add two query constraints and show you how that works. So here, I'm going to put in max results equals 5. So let's add a query parameter over here, question mark, max results equals 5. And we can make it dynamic by saying max results. And over here, we see that appears, and then we can do 5, and we can add one more. So we put the @ symbol, and let's choose order by, let's put this here, order by equals, and let's make this dynamic, order by, and let's say, see the possible options, start time. Cool, let's do this. All right, let's see. Oh, bad request. Okay, I changed it to updated. If I want to order it by, start time, I would have to add another parameter. Anyways, so I ordered it by updated, and I can now get all the results, and I only have 5 results here. Oh, and ordered by. Okay, so apparently if you put like under 100 or something as max results, it's not really showing anything. Not sure what the deal is, but yeah, just put a high number, like, let's see if 50 works. Oh yeah, that works. Put like something above like 15. Nope. 30. Okay, anything above 50 in the max results should work. I'm not sure why that is, but I don't know. If anybody knows, leave it in the comments. So that is essentially how to get a list of events. Now let's look at events and see how we can get then the ID from these events, right? So this we will need to edit or modify any event or get a specific event. We need this ID. So what you're getting here is a list of events, and then if you're doing in Bubble, you can grab the ID from these events and actually use it to get more info about the event or edit the event. Cool. All right, so let's look a little bit more. The next thing will be, let's get an event. So getting an event, again, we looked at how we can get the ID, and the only difference here is we're changing the call to get, and we're adding the event ID at the end. So we're just getting a specific event. And then always include email. This deprecated and ignored. Okay, I love their tone here. And then max attendees. So how many attendees and the time zone. And okay, cool. This is optional. Pretty simple call. Let's go back. Get a specific event. If you again, when you call the list of events, you just copy and paste an event ID. And over here, we can see we have 2 paths, the events and the event ID, and get specific event. I already have one here. And this you probably want to uncheck as private, so you can edit it in the editor. Maybe this too. And then you can initialize it, and ta-da, you get all the information about the event. The reason you may want to limit the max attendees is because it's actually loading the entire list of attendees. Where is the attendees? Yeah, see, it's loading these. So if you have like 500 attendees, it'll like be a huge file, and it can slow down your app. So you may want to only load like 3. Cool. So this looks good. Let's go to the next. The next call we want to look at. Let's look at import. Okay, so import an event, copy, private copy of event, to a calendar. Okay, so the calendar ID is a calendar you're importing to. So you're taking an event from another calendar and importing it to this calendar that you specify. And the way you do it is you will use parameters in the body, and the calendar ID, okay, is in the path. And then you have optional query parameters. Doesn't really matter for us. Conference data version. Okay, so conference data version is actually important. If you want to import, a Google Meet calendar to a Google Meet when you import the event, you will have to specify conference data version equals 1. I don't know why. It's kind of strange. And then support attachments. I won't be going over attachments. All right, let's go to the request body. So this is really important, the end and start. So when you're importing an event, you can import it you have to specify the start and end of this event. So it's making a copy of an event and putting it in your calendar with the specified start and end time that you specify. And the way you import and identify the event is an iCalUID. This is different than the ID we've been talking about so far. There's calendar ID, there's event ID, and then there's iCalUID, which is an identifier for an event based on, I think, like Apple. And you can get it when you call events using the call get all events. Where do we have that? Get all events from a specified calendar. So if I initialize this, or even just let's get a specific event, you can get the UID, and it is iCalUID. So it's specified there. So you have access to it whenever you're getting a calendar event. And so when you're importing from another calendar, you're importing it using a specified UID, iCalUID, and you're making a copy of it, putting it on the calendar you specify, in my case, the primary calendar, with a different start and end time if you want. And then you can change any of the other parameters you would like to change in this event. So the optional properties are any of the other properties you want to change for this event. So you can make a copy, for example, if your boss, and you really don't like him, creates, a one-on-one, you can create a copy in your calendar of that one-on-one, or makes, I don't know, one of your coworkers has a one-on-one with your boss. You can pull a copy of it and call it, one-on-one with the horrible boss. And therefore you have a copy of it in your calendar. Not sure why you would do that, but first example that came to mind. Okay, so let's run this. And then I wanted to show you here that I can add dynamic data to this request. So right here, you have to I hard-coded a lot of the data to this request. See, it's a post request. And just to clarify, I copied the URL directly from here. So this is a random URL. And if you want to make any data dynamic in Bubble, you'll have to add, this in a body of a request. So you only post requests will have a JSON body, and use this for dynamic values. They specify it pretty clearly. And when you use that, similarly to URL paths, it will open up a little key value box here. And then if you uncheck private, you can edit it within the Bubble editor. So within workflow, this should be an action. So within a workflow, you'll be able to edit these values with Bubble dynamic data. So let's run this, and it imports the actual event to my calendar. Not sure. Oh, yeah, here. You can get the HTML link, which is kind of cool. So you can see kind of what was imported. Oh, I missed the H. Okay, there you go. And test import, you can see that that's here. It's kind of a shell of an event, but here it is. Okay, cool. All right, let's move on to the next. That is importing events. And let's go to creating events. This is obviously probably one of the most important things here. So to create an event, essentially you specify the calendar ID of the event. It's very simple URL. Specify the calendar ID and the path, and then you have some optional query parameters. If you want to add a conference solution, you have to put as a query parameter conference data version equals 1. So if you want a Google Meet button on your Google Calendar event, you have to add conference data version equals 1 in the URL. And then these are optional. These are Booleans, integer, string. Pretty basic, pretty simple query parameters. So let's go to add a new event, and let's start with a single event. So let's look here. See, the only thing I have here is conference data version equals 1 in the URL. So I copied the URL and I just added a question mark after events and added conference data solution equals 1. Now, over here at the body, this is a little longer because we are specifying a bunch of parameters. I went over all these parameters in the other video, so I won't go over them so much in detail, but essentially we have the end, the start time, and you can see that these are JSON objects. If you don't know JSON, again, I created a video on exactly how it works. Pretty simple. And over here we have a JSON object with the date, time, time zone, the start time, a summary. So, start has a nested object of date, time, and time zone. Description, pretty simple, comma, guest can invite only, true, guest others can see. And then location, you can add a Zoom link here. So I just added Zoom as a word, but I can add whatever I want. And then attendees, okay, here I did actually specify some more data. So as you can see, I have a list of attendees, and then each item has an object. So over here, oops, accidentally exposed myself there. Well, now you know who I am if you are so keen. But email, and then you can add a friend, the name, the response status, needs action, and optional equals true, or you can change this to false. And then you can add other attendees by putting a comma here and adding another object like this. So then copy this, paste the data, and just change this to a different email, different name, different, etc. Delete that for now. And then you can add a list of attendees that you would like to add. And then we end that list, and you can add the caller ID, in this case, 1. Again, in another video, we'll go over how to get all the caller IDs and what they mean. Now, conference data, I understand, is probably confusing. It's pretty nested, okay? So we have conference data as the parent, and then inside the conference data, we have the create request kind of thing here. And then inside the create request, we have, so the create request, the conference data kind of goes all the way to here. The create request, inside the create request, we have the conference solution key. And so the conference solution key has a type, and then that type is Hangouts Meet. That's the Google Meet, unless you use like Google Hangouts or something. And then there's request ID, which is just a random ID you can generate, which has to go in, and it's not under the conference solution key, it's under the create request. So it's a little nested. You can buy access to my editor in the link to this video and just copy this. But yeah, it's pretty annoying. Actually, it took me a while to figure this out, but this should work. And this is all you need, and then it will add a button to Google Meet. And pretty nested, but as you can see, it's not so complicated. This is the whole thing. It's like 7 lines in the documentation. Reminders, over here, you can see we have reminders and we have overrides. So again, in the other video, I go over leads parameters and why they matter. But essentially, overrides is like, you can see it's just a list of objects. So a list of key values, And each one has a method, which is email and minutes 30. And then again, if you want to add another one, we can add another one by just putting a comma there, copying this, pasting it, and instead of minutes 30, let's do minutes 45. So 45 minutes before this event and 30 minutes before event, there's going to be an email reminder. We ended it here, and then we're use default. We're not going to use the default reminder. So use default means, are we using the default reminders so we're not using the default reminders. You can see here that that's false because we specified the reminders we wanted. So the use default is under reminders, and so is overrides. And each method is under the overrides. So it's like parent-child relationships. Again, it's specified in the documentation that I went over. And then extended properties, you can see here that it's actually pretty interesting. We have extended properties, and then under extended properties, we have the private. So extended properties covers all the way until here. Under the extended properties, we have the private properties, okay? Now here, we can specify as many properties as we want with the key value pair that we choose. So I can add another test property, private extended property. And again, I go over this in the other video, the part 2 or 1 of this series of the events series. And I can type in here whatever the heck I want as the key, and then the value, let's say, has pets or something, or allows pets. And then over here I can put absolutely. Cool. And then I can add as many of these as I want, as many key value pairs. And then under here, I also have shared extended properties. I can also add as many key value as I want to this event, and they will be added to it, and you can call them with these extended properties. The last thing is source, and this is, again, very simple, just source, and then open an object, add in your title and URL. And then the last thing is transparency, transparent, and visibility, public. Cool, let's create this event. Oh man, this is taking longer than I thought. And we created an event successfully. Let's go to the URL, kind of HTML link, and we can see exactly how this looks. Cool. And we can see we have kind of like the source, we have the event, we have a Google Meet link, and yeah, we have this attendee we added 30 minutes before, 45 minutes before. It's public, free. Okay, cool. So let's go back to calendar. Cool. All right, so now we looked at how to add an event. Let's look at the difference between adding a single event and a recurring event. So it's the same API call. The difference is in the body is the recurrence. That's the only difference. So down here, everything else is the same. The only difference here is I added recurrence, and recurrence has recurrence rules. And again, I went over this in the other video, the part 1 or part 2 of this events video. And over here, you can see how these rules are structured, and they have some examples of how this will look. And so you can add a recurrence. If it's a recurring event, you just add a recurrence field and add in, the correct, you can see there could be multiple rules, recurrence rules for this event. And you can follow over here in, event calendars in this URL and see kind of how it's structured. Again, in the other video, I go in more depth about this. Amazing. All right, let's look at some other calls that we have here. So we looked at insert. Let's look at instances. So instances is essentially, if you create a recurring event, you may want to get the instances of that recurring event. And over here, Again, there's a few optional query parameters. It's a GET request, pretty simple. You just specify the calendar ID and the event ID you created for the recurring event, and then you will get all the instances, and you can obviously put macro results, max attendees. Remember, these are query parameters. So let's look at how that looks. Get recurring event instances. So I copied the URL, and I added in some parameters. Oh, bad request. Okay, so let's look at the parameters I did first. See that they're okay. I fixed something. So show deleted can be true or false. I added in max results, max attendees, and I added in an event ID, primary. So yeah, pretty simple, just a few query parameters and a URL path. See how this looks. Cool. All right, we get all the instances of this event. And one thing about this is we should be getting an instance ID. So this list is not a list of events. It's a list of instances of a recurring event, right? You have the main recurring event, and then you have the repetition of it, like maybe weekly or daily by a specific type of rules. And they have an ID, and that is a recurrence ID. It's an instance ID. So it's not an ID of an event. It's an ID of a specific instance of an original event. And we can see even that there's an original start time. If you look at the call specifically, see that there's an original start time to each event, and that is the original time when the main event started, and these are like the instances that it repeats for. So that is getting instances of a specific recurring event. All right, let's move on to move events. So move events, we already went through list. Essentially just moving event to a different calendar. Pretty simple. The only thing is, you add the calendar. This is the source calendar that the event is on, the event. So if I'm moving from my primary calendar to my secondary calendar, this would be my primary calendar ID would go here. My event ID would go here. And then I just copy this URL, the kind of appended move, paste it into my Bubble app over here. And then I can add a destination. So the destination is required as a query parameter. And that is this is the calendar ID of the calendar I'm moving the event to. And then send updates. That is send updates, get change in the events organizer. Okay, so this is moving the entire event to a different calendar. And then you can specify if you want all notification sent to all guests or only non-Google Calendar guests, just to let them know that a calendar moved, the organizer changed, if the calendar moves to a different calendar. So yeah, pretty simple here. If we go back to kind of Google Calendar, see that we can move to the calendar ID we're getting and the event ID, and the destination is going to be a different calendar. So if you want to get a calendar ID, by the way, using the UI, I go over this in different videos, but let's look at this test calendar. You just go to settings and sharing, and you can copy the calendar ID here. So you can move events there. And then event ID, you can get, again, from listing all the events of a specific calendar. We've gone over how to get event IDs. And then primary is also a way of just specifying your main calendar. And then, cool. And then you can call this. Oh. Okay, the issue is that I already imported this event to another calendar. So now when I try and import it again, it's saying, oh, okay, this calendar already had an organizer change because it moved to a different calendar. So now you can't change the organizer of this event because it already moved. So we need to grab another event. So let's get another event. Import. Let's get all events from a specific calendar, and let's kind of pick a random event. Obviously, you would do this in Logic in Bubble. I'm just doing it manually for testing. So I just picked a random event, copied the ID, went back to my API call, which is move events. and then I put the event ID here, and now it's going to move that event to the new calendar. Cool, awesome. Now we can see the HTML link, and therefore we can always see kind of where the event is, which I really enjoy. All right, that worked. It's returning the event. Okay, awesome. All right, so next let's go to quick add events. Oh man, we're at 30 minutes. Let's speed this up. Okay, quick add. Pretty simple. Quick add is essentially a way to add events without specifying a very complex body. You can see you do not supply a body. This is like a lighter method, maybe if you're adding like hundreds of events. Not sure exactly what this is for, but essentially you specify the calendar ID and then quick add, and then you put in the calendar ID and you add in the URL some text describing the event. I'm guessing this is very performant. But yeah, so you can quickly add an event by specifying in the URL a query parameter with the text of this event, and it will create an event pretty quickly. So let's go over here and look at this. To my primary calendar, and you can see here the URL is calendars, calendar ID, events, and then we have quick add over here, and then question mark, text, and then this is the text of the event, and send updates. So send updates, again, is just like guests who should receive notifications about the event, but we're not adding any guests using this method, but you can always edit the event after and add attendees. But essentially, so over here, you can just, this is a test quick add 1, 2, 3, and let's just initialize, and boom, created the event. Pretty cool actually. We can go to the URL of the event, see it over here. Cool. See, it's added to my calendar, like the main Wise Bubbler calendar. No info about it, but all right. Okay, and then the last two that I'm going to go over are the update and patch. So patch and update are very similar. The difference is that patch, again, I went over this in the other video, the part 1 or part 2. I'm not sure again what I will make it, but or in other videos. So the difference between patch and update is that patch won't affect, if you include any of the parameters. Remember, we created an event, we had a lot of these body parameters. So if you use the patch method, it essentially updates the event only with the parameters you send. So if you send attendees, a list of attendees, it will only replace the attendees and leave everything alone. If you use the update method, and I'll show you what that means on Bubble, then it will replace the entire calendar event and it actually won't let you, because you have to add a summary. So if you add summary and attendees, it will replace the entire event and remove all the other parameters it had and just add the attendees you just added and the summary you just added. So update actually removes the item from the database and adds a new one with all the parameters you send. So it's like a more powerful update, takes a lot more data and compute time. Patch will actually just change the specific parameters you send to the event. So that's the difference between the patch and update method, but essentially it's very similar to creating an event. The only thing is you're adding in the event ID. So let's go patch. You're adding in the event ID in the URL as a path, and it's required. And then you can add in all these query parameters, and then you send the body. So let's just look at the patch method. Over here, I just added max attendees, and then I added the event. Well, in this case, I added the event ID over here, even though I should probably make this dynamic. No, it's not the smartest move. Event ID. and max attendees. All right, this makes more, it's a little cleaner. Added conference data version equal 1, max attendees. And over here, I specified all these different parameters, and I used the patch method. So that's the edit event patch method. And I'm editing this event, and then I'm just adding, I can add in all the parameters we used. I just copy pasted from the create event, from the insert event, add a new event API call, and you can specify whatever ones you want to change. But for example, if I deleted all this and just added the end date, a different end date, then it wouldn't affect all the other parameters I sent in the event. It would only change the end date. Versus if we used, the update method and I did the same thing, it would only have the end date that I specified, but it will delete all the other parameters. So the edit event update method is using put, and the edit event patch method is using patch. So that's the only difference you will see here. And then I don't like this. Oops. Back here. Oh. Whatever. Okay. So then we add essentially event ID here. Let's do max attendees 5, and let's pull the same event that we got from before. All right, I think it was here anyway. Okay, cool. And then we can initialize this, and it will modify the event with all the properties we just added. So let's just look at an example here. We'll go to the patch method. If we go to summary, title, is that what we're calling? Oh, title, sorry. In events, I think it's just title. So my startup 1, 2, 3, and then we initialize this. We can see that the title, search for title, is my startup 1, 2, 3. And if we go to the HTML link, nope. Yeah, I changed the source title, not the summary. So the source title is my startup 1, 2, 3, and that successfully changed. So that is it. Again, if you want access to the editor that I'm using here and all the API calls to all the Google Calendar APIs, in the link, there's a paid link where you can buy access to this editor. Not only, even if you don't need it, it would be great if you can buy it to support me. And wow, we are 40 minutes. I'm so sorry. That is way too long than I usually do. But thank you so much for sticking with me, and check out the rest of this series. Google Calendar is way more complicated than I thought, but it's pretty cool to watch. Thank you.